How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hello, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And welcome back to Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane?
If you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because we're not here to hate on it. After all, there's a reason it's earned its reputation.
But when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
So, take a look around, because if you look for it, I've got a sneaky feeling you'll find that movies better than Citizen Kane actually are all around. Maybe even in today's topic, Love Actually 2003. Parker, what do you think? Is Love Actually better than Citizen Kane?
Look, do you want this to be the shortest episode we've ever had?
I told you, you said it was going to be short, and I said I beg to differ, because I have so many things to say, but go ahead and make it as short as you want.
Oh, the shortest that I can make it right this second is absolutely not.
So you're saying that Love Actually isn't better.
That's
than Citizen
exactly
Kane.
what I'm saying.
This guy just said that the feeling of love isn't better than Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I'm on record now.
It's been one of those,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, here we are.
Okay, obviously, Love Actually isn't better than Citizen Kane.
No.
Obviously.
Obviously.
And I mainly wanted to do this because I felt like we'd had it too good for too long. I would argue that we've only watched, like, 2 bad movies this year. One of which was Forrest Gump.
Sure.
One of which was Titanic. But Titanic isn't necessarily a fully bad movie either. Mm-hmm. So I was like, we got to get one more in here before the end of the year. And I hadn't seen Love Actually.
Neither had I. I'd kind of hoped that I was like, maybe it'll be like charming and sentimental and saccharine enough that I'm like, I don't know, this gets me up in my feels.
Yeah.
No.
No feels for you?
No.
I had a feeling. And it was, what the hell? Because here's the thing, Parker, is that my exposure with Love Actually,
Yeah.
before this, obviously, is Andrew Lincoln Scene.
Naturally.
Andrew Lincoln Scene parody on SNL. Thomas Brody Sangster running through an airport. That's pretty much it.
Sure.
Occasionally a picture of Alan Rickman from this movie. And in recent years, my parents had mentioned Love Actually and been like, you should watch, like, it's worth a watch. And they were like, but it is really weird. And we don't get it. And I was like, okay, cool, good. My parents being the people I talk to about movies other than Parker.
Sure.
No, everybody in my life. Anyway. So I really had no idea what to expect from this. Fun little fact for everybody. Parker and I, as we promised at the end of the last episode, we did see this in theaters.
We saw this in theaters, ladies and gentlemen.
We paid money
Yeah.
to see its 20th anniversary release in theaters.
Saw it with
Re-release.
fellow odd brother Will Kauser.
Yes, Will hopped in too. So even though he won't be part of this episode, know that Will also has things to
He
say.
has lots of thoughts.
And we aired them all out at an IHOP afterward.
Yes, we did.
But this is more. This is
Yeah.
a moment we're sharing with you.
You're
And that
here.
moment is, we went and saw it in theaters, and also Will was running late. And I was worried we'd miss the first 10 minutes. And so Parker pulled it up on his phone. And we watched the first 10 minutes of Love Actually, like, waiting in line for Will to show up.
Because it was snowing really bad.
Because it was snowing really bad. That's why, yeah, it was just bad weather. Very Christmassy, very holiday of us. Indeed. And then we got in the theater, and it hadn't even fully started yet. So we'd already seen the first 10 minutes when we walked in for the first 10 minutes.
We were pre-prepped.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I've seen this part. It's funny. Anyway, that's my history with Love Actually, is I watched it, and I already said what I thought. Parker, what'd you think? What's your history with Love Actually?
Pretty much the same thing. I've seen the caroling cue cards.
Yep.
I had kind of heard about this a little bit, especially from my older sister. Shout out to Amanda. Her favorite movie of all time is About Time, which is same writer director.
Yep.
And so she had also told me that she enjoys this movie, but kind of similar to your parents, she's like, I don't know, it's weird. She's like, I like lots of it, but like it's weird. And that was about all I knew about it. I knew that there was multiple storylines going on all at once.
Yes.
I knew who was in it, but I didn't really know their relations to each other. Like, I knew there was a Liam Neeson storyline.
Yeah.
I knew Emma Thompson was in here. And And I think I'd seen lots of clips of like the Bill Nighy stuff.
Yeah, that felt familiar to me too.
Yeah. But I had no context for any of it.
The context in this movie is insane.
Yeah.
Because living 20 years of my life post this movie, and to have like seen the Andrew Lincoln scene specifically. You know what? We're not even going to try and break this down. I don't care.
What would we do?
What would we do? We'd break down each story individually. If you haven't seen Love Actually, you gotta check it out to understand this episode, because the movie makes no damn sense. Compels me though. And what was I talking about?
You were talking about the context.
Because the Andrew Lincoln scene is used all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had assumed, one, I didn't know that her husband, Keira Knightley's husband, was Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. And that changes things. I'm like, well, he's a very cool, likable man.
Yeah.
And it's weird that you're
and he's cool and likable
and also
in the movie.
He's not an asshole.
Yeah. Like I
They're in a happy relationship.
I had heard people mention that she's married.
Yes.
And that was the only, I was like, okay, so
Yes.
she's married and he's doing this big romantic gesture.
And I figured that she was married to some
Right.
guy.
I was like, well, maybe maybe her husband's just the worst.
Yeah.
You know?
Because also the implication being like, he can't know that I'm here. Maybe
Right.
he's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
No.
He's a nice guy.
The context is that at the start of the movie, we see that it's their wedding. Keira Knightley and Keira and Chiwetel's, what are their names? I don't even know their names.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's their wedding. And Andrew Lincoln is like the best man and his best friend. And he's filming everything on his like little camcorder.
Which, real quick,
Yeah.
just because it always makes me laugh when movies do this, especially movies from the early 2000s. It's so funny when they try to pass off like really well shot, probably either done on film or like really prosumer camcorders of the time. And like, yeah, no, he's just palming it. He's holding this camcorder in the palm of his hand, and it is the steadiest shot you've ever seen. He dollies back at a certain point. Like, he's got camera moves to his shitty little camcorder. It drives me nuts. I hate it.
That's the issue that Parker took.
Yeah.
Because he films everything, and also he sets up an elaborate musical number for their wedding where he has people sing a Beatles song.
Yep.
And they're like, what? This is amazing. And Andrew Lincoln's like, yeah, I did it. Anyway, whatever. And then later, Keira Knightley calls him and is like, hey, you don't like me very much. She's like, but my wedding video sucks.
Yeah, like it came back, the color's all wrong.
Yeah, it's blue and wibbly.
Mm-hmm.
Just a very British thing to say.
Indeed.
Love it. And she's like, but you were filming. Can I see what you got? And he's like, oh, I think I lost it. And I was like, okay, like we know you're in love with her, whatever.
Sure.
They set that up. But she goes to his house and is like, oh, is this it? And like,
and he's transferred it to a VHS. And like, it's not even, because he's filming it on these little mini DV tapes. And that was the very first camera I ever used, was one of those. You have to go and you have to transfer it.
Yeah.
And he transferred it and he kept the VHS and he's like, I don't know, I lost it.
And he labeled it.
He
labeled it about like their wedding, whatever their names are, their wedding.
Yeah.
And so when he's like lying to her face and she's in his house and she's like, I know you hate me. You've never once spoken to me ever. She's like, but I want to see this wedding video. He's like, I did lose it. And she's like, is this it? This labeled VHS tape? And he's like, oh,
Sarah's wedding or whatever.
No, don't do it. She puts it in and it comes up and it's just all like close-up footage of her throughout the night.
Like he frames out his best friend in every shot.
And he's like edited it together, probably. And at first she's like, oh, I look quite pretty. And then it slowly sinks in for her what this is. Mm-hmm. And when it's over, she just says, no, but you hate me.
Instead of being like, I'm gonna go,
because that's a weird thing to do.
It's a weird thing to have to have your fiance/husband's best friend who you think hates you, who has never spoken.
They don't have a relationship.
They don't have a dynamic. They don't have a relationship. To then go over and see that he has a videotape of just your face at your wedding in these really intimate close-ups.
Yeah.
And he's not saying anything. He's just kind of sitting there like biting his fingers like, oh God.
And then she's like, but you hate me. And she can't make sense of it. And he goes, well, I got to go to lunch.
Can you just let yourself
Can you just
out?
let yourself out later? And I'm like, how does she have the key? Like, are you going to lock your house? Like, what's your deal, man? Anyway, he leaves. And there is the funny, because this movie is pretty funny.
There's some
a
funny
lot
stuff.
of
There's
like
a lot of
laugh
funny
out loud
stuff.
moments and gags in this movie. It's not all bad.
Yeah.
But there are like 5 of the 7 stories or whatever in this that just do not work for me.
Yeah.
And I don't think work for you. And I think we'll just talk about each of them, but we don't need to do them in order.
Right. We don't need them in order. Just like quick rapid fire so that we have like a summary,
Yeah.
a table of contents to go back to.
Yeah, but real quick, he does go outside and he is kind of like, oh, should I go back in? Oh, and then he like does like a big like
He, like,
jump, and this
crunches
man
down.
holding shopping bags like
It's really funny.
stumbles backward, and that was really funny. And that's the context for the caroling scene.
Yeah.
Is that she has no relationship to him, and she thought he hated him, and then she went to his house and he had a video of her that he put together and shot intimately and close up at her wedding, betraying his best friend.
Yeah.
And he does this whole elaborate thing with cue cards, and then she's just kind of like, and then he starts walking away, and then she runs after him, kisses him once, and then goes back, and then at the end they're all at the airport together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so we just aren't going to tell Chiwetel.
Yeah. He doesn't need to know.
That's bad.
It's bad.
It's really bad.
It's really bad, and it's presented as like the most romantic thing in the movie, and I don't understand it.
But it really isn't.
No, it is not.
But
Which is, I realized as you were talking about the summary just now that they sort of cue you up for it. Like at the wedding,
They do.
He makes some comments like, "Oh, you didn't do one of your big grand like spectacles, did you?" And he's like,
Yeah.
No, of course not. And then they all start singing the deal. It's like he's want to do this. Like
Yeah.
he has a reputation for doing this kind of thing. Doesn't excuse it.
Doesn't excuse it.
Not at all.
Yeah. Weird.
Weird. Okay.
So that's kind of that's the big one in Love Actually.
So the basic, the broadest overview we can give you, because we are not going through this in chronological order. There's no way. It would make no sense, and also it just would not be fun to listen to. So the broadest overview we can give is that we're following like 6 or 7 storylines, all taking place in and around London.
Yes.
2003, and it's
5
weeks out.
until Christmas.
5 weeks till Christmas, and we're seeing all these storylines play out. And each of these storylines have overlapping characters. Some of them are more established than others. And then you get to the end of the movie.
Some of them are
and-
just like, oh, by the way, these people are friends.
Yeah, it's wild. Like they're the final scene of the movie, they're all at the airport, and you're like, oh, these people talk to these people from this storyline? Didn't know that.
I guess it's meant to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
But really, for me, I was just like, okay.
And so like the structure is there because the movie opens with this big monologue that Max so wonderfully parodied at the beginning of this, where Hugh Grant is voicing over and he's talking about like the idea of love. And that he's like, look, if you look anywhere, like love
Yeah.
is everywhere.
It's not always big and grand or whatever, but it's...
And there's this very nice montage of all these real people
Yes.
at Heathrow Airport
Welcome.
welcome each other
Yeah.
from their travels.
meeting up with each other from travel.
And saying goodbye to each other as they're leaving and things
Yes.
like that. It's just, this nice little like pocket of humanity.
And also very 2003.
Totally.
The most 2003 concept that ever could have been done. It's like,
100%.
well, what if we made an airport feel nice?
Yeah.
What if people
What if
were love? What if love actually is in an airport?
Exactly. So that's kind of like the basic framework. And then from there, they're like, okay, here are 6 or 7 stories about different kinds of love. So we've got the Keira Knightley, Andrew Lincoln one. We've got Liam Neeson mourning his recently deceased
and
wife.
Thomas Brody Sangster's his son, who's in love with a girl at school.
Yep.
Desperately wants to impress her.
Yep. Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman.
Who are married. And Emma Thompson is Hugh Grant's sister, which we'll get into his story.
Yes.
But Alan Rickman works at a place.
Yeah.
Do they run publishing? I don't know.
I think it's a publishing company.
And he runs that.
Mm-hmm.
And their story is basically that his secretary at work is desperately trying to sleep with him.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than having any like substantial opinion on it, he just kind of goes, okay, for like the whole movie.
Yeah.
And it's
He is neither here nor there about it.
But he's like not committed to it, but he's also like, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like a weird,
It's a strange dynamic.
strange dynamic. And then Laura Linney works at his work.
Uh-huh.
And Laura Linney's in love with Carl, who I don't remember the actor's name, but Carl's the hot man of the office.
Yep.
And should they hook up? And Alan Rickman goes, or you should tell him you want to have sex and lots of babies. And it's very funny.
Yeah.
But we'll get into
We'll get into
that. So she wants to have sex with Carl,
Yeah.
and they hook up, and then she also has a brother who is mentally unwell at a, what are those called? like a just like
sanatorium.
Sanatorium mental hospital
Yeah.
sort of thing, and she's all kind of always on call to take care of him. And then there is Bill Nighy, who is an aged pop star, rock star, who...
The more I've been thinking about it, like, he's a bit too hard rock and roll for this to be entirely a one-to-one, but kind of feels like a McCartney commentary the more I think about it. Like, of that time period.
Yeah,
it's sort
he
of...
also feels very, like, Bowie of the time to me, too. But definitely that kind of, like...
Right.
A little bit of, like, a Mick Jagger.
Totally.
Like, he's just, like, all those 60s, 70s guys.
Yeah.
But he's recently... the movie opens with him re-recording his, like, classic to be Christmas-themed, and he hates it, and he thinks it's shit. And then his story is basically just going on the radio and...
trying to get this to number one.
Yeah, but also being like, it's terrible, but everyone should just put it at number one anyway.
Yeah.
Which is really funny.
It is very funny.
And he also keeps body shaming his manager on air, which isn't a problem.
Oh, there's a theme to that
in this movie. There's a central... Love actually is body shaming people.
Yeah.
And so... Anyway, and then at the end, he decides not to go to Elton John's Christmas party. Or he did go, and then he comes back, and then he hangs out with his manager instead. So he spends the whole movie hating his manager, and then he goes, actually, I think I love you, man. And, you know.
So there's that one. Then there is the probably, like, the weakest link between all the rest of them is, I can't remember the actor's name. You know him.
Colin Firth.
No.
Oh,
Colin Firth is, that's another one, which also is kind of, like, bare bones thread.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about Colin Firth. Colin Firth... he's in a relationship, and he finds out that his wife and or girlfriend is sleeping with his brother.
Yeah, but he finds that out because at the start of the day, at the early part of the movie, she's like, I just feel and look so terrible. And
he's going to the wedding.
He's going to the wedding.
Yeah.
But they don't really show him at the wedding, do they? I don't know if they do.
But then, it's the wedding, though, isn't it?
It is the wedding
because Emma Thompson's at the funeral at the same time.
Yes, because when he comes back to the house and he finds that she's cheating on him with his brother, he's like, yeah, I just thought I'd pop back here before the reception.
You're right.
But they really breeze past that, and I don't think he's ever in a shot with anyone at the wedding.
No, I don't think so.
He feels like they got Colin Firth and they went, we'll fly you to France.
Pretty much, yeah, because he just leaves.
Yeah, he leaves. He leaves. He goes to France. He has a caretaker who speaks Portuguese and lives with him for the 5 weeks.
Yeah, and their whole thing is the language barrier.
The whole thing is the language barrier.
Stuff going on with them.
The joke is that they're saying the same things at the same time, but in different languages, even though they can't understand one another. So, like, she's like, "Oh, like what person doesn't make copies?" And then he's like, "I really should make copies of this book I'm writing."
Yeah,
he's a writer.
They do that bit a lot.
And they do that bit a lot, and then he goes back home.
Yep.
And then he's like, actually, I hate this.
Yep.
And I love her. Because they both say they love each other, but they can't understand each other.
No.
So then he flies back to France, and he asks for her hand in marriage, and she says yes, and then they get married.
And then there is...
Chris Marshall is the one you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's Chris Marshall, British comedian Chris Marshall, in this movie, and he's just playing the worst guy in the world.
worst dude.
Just the worst man, constantly sexually harassing women at weddings that he caters or whatever. And he decides that women in Britain don't like him. But he realizes that if he goes to America, that women will love him because he's British, which is a funny gag. It's a funny idea.
And his friend keeps telling him, he's like, no, that's a stupid idea.
Yes.
You're an asshole and nobody likes you.
Yes.
Like, this isn't going to change anything.
Yeah. But he's like, I'll be a god of sex. So he goes to America. He goes to Wisconsin. And again, there's really funny bits in this part, except for the fact that he fundamentally is the worst man in the world.
And the bit goes on.
And the bit goes on way too long because he goes to America. He's like, I'm going to go to the first bar that I can go to in America. And he goes there and there's a really hot lady there. And I go, okay, funny bit. Like it worked out for him. It was going to one of two ways.
Sure.
Either there wouldn't be anyone there and he'd be sad and I would have been, yes. Or there would be a woman there who's hot and it's true. Yeah. And I go, okay, funny commentary on, our obsession with British men. But then there's another one. And then there's another one. And then they all sit around and talk about how they all sleep together naked and he should come back to their house. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry. We're just so sexy and we sleep together naked. And we have a fourth roommate too. And he's like, oh. And then it cut to their house and we see them in silhouette going to bed together as the fourth roommate walks up. And it's shot like it's a cameo reveal.
It's really strange.
It's
I don't
really
know what's going on with all that.
Anyway, and then he comes back at the end and he's like, I did it. And he's got like a hot American Girl on his arm, Harriet, and then there's another one, and she's what's her name from James Bond?
Oh yeah.
Christmas. What's her name? I don't remember her name.
It's slipping my mind.
Anyway,
yeah. So there's that storyline. Martin Freeman is an actor in porn.
Yes,
and it's really funny. I like that storyline a lot.
Yeah, but he's a stand-in
Mm-hmm.
for like porn, which is really funny.
Yep.
And he and the actors that he's with, who I don't know the name of, they just are having normal conversations throughout this like 5-week shoot.
Yeah.
And then at the end they end up together. It's really nice.
It's really funny.
It's a funny and charming story.
And then kind of the big heavy hitter is the Hugh Grant storyline.
It is. Did we already talk about Liam Neeson and his son?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
you mentioned Liam Neeson mourning his wife. Oh, we did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Hugh Grant.
Yeah. Hugh Grant is the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister. But
Dave.
But he's not married.
No. He's not married, but he's hot. He's Hugh Grant.
He's Hugh Grant, and he's charming. And unfortunately, it did work on me. I was like,
charming
man, this guy
as
is
hell.
really charming.
Oh, no.
I get it.
He's charming and hip.
Yeah. Oh, man, and he's cool.
He's cool.
And he's like not so like...
He's a badass, they say on the radio. We're going to get to that.
We're going to get to that, too.
Okay.
See, Barker, this couldn't be the shortest episode we've ever done because there's so much to talk about.
It really could if we wanted it to be. Exactly. It was one of the two. Either it was going to be the shortest, or we're going to be here for ages.
Either we like sit down to talk about it, or we just don't even bother.
Yeah. So the main like crux of that storyline is that he has a like catering assistant who works at whatever like the Prime Minister equivalent to the White House is, I suppose.
It's 10 Downing Street.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He's at 10 Downing Street, and they sort of hit it off together, and there's kind of this romantic tension.
They're both pretty casual about the whole situation.
Right. She
swears. She swears in front of him, and he's
like, oh, I find that very charming.
And then he walks into his office and he goes, well, that's rather unfortunate. And something that I do like about what Hugh Grant's doing here is that he does have a fundamentally sad aura.
Oh, yeah.
Like
sad boy energy.
Like he's very charming, but he just has this energy of like, God, I'm kind of miserable, aren't I? And it's like, I love that. Like it works really well. And I understand why people would be so drawn to him in this role.
Sure.
And it's very charming because I think this might be the one that we have to talk about after the Andrew Lincoln thing.
Yeah.
Because this is one where the context absolutely blew my mind. Because he falls in love with this girl, Natalie. And I'm like, normal. Cool. This is kind of working, although the power dynamics are questionable. As is the case with every relationship in this movie.
Right.
Except for Thomas Brody Sangster and his cute little American girlfriend.
And also, I'm going to go out of my way to say this now, that Natalie is, in every aspect, incredibly conventionally attractive.
Yes.
Like, she is a very attractive woman. And the movie tries to make you think that she is simultaneously is and isn't because of the things that they say about her.
Yeah, like we're supposed to understand why Hugh Grant loves her because she is beautiful, but then everyone else in the movie is like, she's kind of fat though, isn't she?
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Which is nuts because like this woman is not obese in the slightest. Like she is a very average looking person.
And also, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It just,
and yet it's a hang up for so many people in this movie.
Yeah, everybody
just like
comments
Bill
on
Nye
it.
constantly being like, my manager's fat. And like them being like, Natalie's fat, and her whole family at one point is like chubs.
Yeah,
and it's like, what?
The other staff members are like, oh yeah, her thighs are like tree trunks.
Yeah, and I'm like,
what are you
talking about? That's insane. Anyway, so he's in love with her, but that's not the most insane thing that happens to Natalie.
No, it's not.
Because they're set it up when Hugh Grant first gets there as prime minister. They're like, America's been really mean to us. The last administration got pushed around by America, and we're not going to let that happen this time. And Hugh Grant goes, yeah, I don't know. I think I might.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know.
America's whatever.
Powerful country in the world.
Like,
I think we should get along.
We should be pushovers, basically.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing everything in this movie.
It.
But that's basically it.
That is the extent of Richard Curtis' understanding of politics.
Yeah, it is. He's like, yeah, countries push each other around.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So then the president comes to say hello, and he's the new president as well. He's like, I'm doing things.
It is shocking to me, like, the bar that this movie sets for, like, its style of humor. It is kind of insane to me that this isn't just, like, the most cranked to 11 Bush impression in the world.
Or Clinton.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of doing a Clinton.
It's kind of a Clinton energy, sure.
Yeah.
But just like with the time period. I'm just surprised it's
weird.
not.
Yeah, it's neither of those. It's neither of like the two most recent presidents primed for parody.
Right.
And have been parodied so much. And yet this movie elects to just have a man.
Generic brand U.S. president.
I'm the U.S. president. It's like when Doctor Who had the president on. And you're like, who's this guy? Oh, he's just a guy. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I guess that's who the president is. Anyway, so the president comes to talk to Hugh Grant, and they're having like a pretty normal conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then Natalie walks by, and the president like leers at her,
Mm-hmm.
and then is like, "Damn," you know. And
After just talking about his wife.
yeah, and then he says some nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
and Hugh Grant's kind of like, clearly like,
Well, I like her.
I
Why
like
do
her.
you?
Why would
like
you
her?
say that? I like her. And then they go into a room, and they're talking. Hugh Grant's like, "Great, I'm gonna go grab those papers."
Yeah.
And he leaves, and Natalie enters to bring in tea or whatever. And when he comes back, the president of the United States is like
Kissing her neck.
kissing her neck.
She's
Non-consensually.
obviously uncomfortable.
And she sees Hugh Grant, and she leaves with the energy of, "Oh no, you just found us."
It's.
And she's like, I don't know if she says I'm sorry, but she like leaves.
I think she does. I think she's like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And then she leaves. And then they go to a press conference. And the press conference is, a reporter stands up and goes, "Mr. President, has this been a good visit for you?" And he goes, "It's been a great visit.
We got everything.
We got
came
everything
for.
we came for. And I think our special relationship can stay very special." And then they go, and Prime Minister? And he goes, you know what? I'm pulling it up because it's insane that this is.
I don't understand this quote, and I don't understand the rest of the movie's reaction to this quote. Like the way the music swells and the way these insert shots of everybody's reactions are played.
Yeah.
It's filmed and presented like
with all the gravitas
the Independence Day
of a
speech.
West Wing clip. Like,
Yeah.
You're like, man.
You're like, wow, he really is just, putting it to him. Like, wow, super inspiring piece of policy.
But here's what he says. I love that word, relationship. Covers all manners of sins, doesn't it? I fear that this has become a bad relationship. A relationship based on the president taking exactly what he wants and casually ignoring all those things that really matter to. Hugh Grant looks at Natalie. Natalie looks at him and he goes, "Britain." And then he says, "We may be a small country, but we're a great one too. Country of Shakespeare, Churchill, the Beatles, Sean Connery, Harry Potter." And I'm like, most of those things actually suck.
Yeah, don't really hold up under scrutiny,
No, they don't,
unfortunately.
unfortunately. David Beckham's right foot. David Beckham's left foot, come to that. And everyone laughs. Everyone. A friend who bullies us is no longer a friend. And since bullies only respond to strength, from now onward, I will be prepared to be much stronger. And the president should be prepared for that. And after that, I presume all of the news outlets in America and England went, "Oh, we're going to war."
Okay, war has been declared.
War has been declared.
Marvelous.
Because that's a weird thing to
It's
say.
a really weird thing to say when you're standing next to the, chief of another nation.
And to just be like, bad relationship, I'm going to be much stronger in the future, and you should be prepared for that. You can't just be saying that.
Can't just say that.
Because the vibes are off from both men.
It's really strange.
Although I did pitch to Parker that this interaction makes a lot more sense in 2019 if it's Trump and Boris Johnson.
Oh, sure.
Because then it's like, it's a very special relationship, and then Boris Johnson just saying some nonsense because he's got the IQ of a rat. And it's a weird thing. It's so weird. And that's so funny that Richard Curtis is like, this is how this works, I assume.
Yeah, and again, everybody applauds him. Like, standing ovation.
And then they're like, our prime minister.
Yeah, and
stood
everybody
up
on
to
the
bully.
news is like,
He's a-
hey, check out this
he's a
smackdown from the
total
prime
badass.
minister.
And it's like, is he?
What are you talking about?
That's not how politics works. And if it was trying to be like a parody or like satire of like all policy is decided by the emotions of like overly emotional, powerful men.
Right.
That doesn't land.
No,
because
it
you're asking us
doesn't.
to
It's-
fundamentally believe in and agree with the sentimentality with which it's
Exactly.
presented. Anyway, so then Hugh Grant decides that he can't be around Natalie anymore because he's just too horny.
Yep. And he has her transferred without her
somewhere
knowing.
else.
Which they don't really address like textually, but I'm sure that's part of why like she's so apologetic at the end, because she's like, oh, I got transferred because this happened and I'm a bad person, instead of, oh, I got transferred because the prime minister's got the hots for me and is trying to be professional.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So
They
anyway,
never talk about it.
Later he gets a Christmas card. Also there's like a very fun sequence where he does a dance.
It's very fun. It's very silly.
Very fun, famous sequence from this movie. Very silly. And that comes after this, because then they're like, here's a song for our badass prime minister. And you play Jump, and it's like, is that a song?
Is that a badass song?
I mean, I love that song, but like, is that Like, I don't think that's about like standing up to
It's
the
also
bully.
so funny because, I don't know, he's probably what, like mid-30s in this movie?
Yeah.
And they say, here's a golden oldie for our golden oldie.
I didn't catch that.
I'm like, what are you talking about? He is this young hip prime minister.
He's like a Tony Blair equivalent.
Yeah, oh my god.
But he's way better because he's Hugh Grant.
He's Hugh Grant.
Also, we know nothing about his politics.
Not a bit.
He
nothing.
might be like a total...
Oh,
because he's definitely not the most opposed to Thatcher.
No.
Because he calls her, like, you minx or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, did this have happened for you, you minx, to her portrait? And I'm like, so are you a fan of Thatcher? Or I'm just curious because that will ultimately decide whether or not I'm in your corner at all.
Again, Richard Curtis has no understanding of politics.
He has no understanding of politics. But Love Actually is being unpolitical. Which is what Forrest Gump taught us as well.
Sure.
I'm reflecting back. We're towards the end of the year. We're reflecting back on Forrest Gump for some reason. Anyway, and then at the end, he's like, actually, I missed this because she writes him a Christmas card. And she says, I'm sorry that I messed up.
Yeah.
I'm still yours. You're Natalie.
Kiss, kiss, kiss.
Kiss, kiss. And I'm like, that's not how that...
No.
What? Like, what are you talking about? So anyway, in a very nice and charming sequence that out of context plays wonderfully is him going door to door in the town that
she told him where she lives, and she's like, oh, the dodgy part, like over by this street,
Yeah.
and he's like, it's the longest street in the world. Like, it's really funny.
Yeah, and he goes there and he has to go door to door, and it's really cute.
Yeah,
and there's kids who ask him to carol, and there's people who are just like, aren't you the prime minister? And he's like, yes, and he makes some funny remarks, and it's a nice scene.
He's very charming.
He sees Alan Rickman's secretary, and we'll get to her. And then he goes to Natalie, and Natalie's like, oh, we're all heading out the door. Her whole family's there. Like, we're going to go see the pageant, the Christmas pageant. That's another kind of, like, culmination of everyone's
which is
story.
everybody's going to this pageant.
Well, it's the hottest play in town,
Absolutely.
Parker. They have an octopus in the nativity.
Wow. Lobsters
and such. Anyway, so he goes and he watches the nativity with her backstage so that he's not a secret.
Yeah.
And then the curtain comes up and they're kissing backstage, and he's like,
not so secret.
not so secret. And then, and that's basically it. And then they get married or whatever. Maybe.
Sure.
In the airport, he comes out, and then she runs up to him. And it's very cute and charming, the idea of... And you did a funny... Yeah, do you want to talk about that? She runs up to him and, like, hugs him.
Yeah, and, like, the Secret Service is, like, keeping people back or whatever. And just...
She
bursts out of the crowd. And Will and I turned to Max, and we just did finger guns, like, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah. I think we did the same thing with Thomas Brody Sangster earlier when he runs through. But I guess it's England. It's not the TSA. But
sure.
I was like, he's going. I think, didn't you
no
say
fly list?
No fly. We'll get to that
for the rest of his life.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Anyway, that's the Hugh Grant story.
That's the Hugh Grant story, which is probably like, I don't know,
third or fourth. Over. Oh, what were you?
Yeah, just like as far as like screen time goes,
it
feels like it's one of the more.
It's one of the major ones. Yeah, I'd say there's like 3 major ones.
Yeah,
and that's one of the bigger ones. But I'd also rank it if we're ranking them.
Oh, sure.
I would say it's like 3rd or 4th best.
Yeah.
Because she apologizes again in the car.
It's really weird.
She apologizes for being sexually assaulted.
And he doesn't, there's no like, hey, this wasn't your fault.
It's real weird.
He's just like, well, I suppose I'll forgive you, won't I? Like, it's just kind of that energy. I don't know. It's strange. I don't like it.
Man.
Yeah. Okay, so...
Let's talk about something nice.
Let's talk about Liam
Neeson and his son.
Yeah, Liam Neeson and his son is really good. So Liam Neeson is just being a good dad.
I'm being a good dad.
And his wife has passed away, and he does a really great job of just, like, he's just genuinely really cut up about it. Like, the funeral is really nice.
Yeah, good performance.
And, like, you kind of understand a little bit about her and their dynamic, and she's, you gather this, like, this was a woman who was very free-spirited and had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, her final wish was that, like, I play her off with this song and I said over my dead body. And she's like, well, no, actually, darling, over mine.
Yeah. And it's like an upbeat song. And he looks absolutely devastated.
He just looks like a shell. He looks like
quite good
husk.
in this.
And he keeps confiding in Emma Thompson, who's his friend. And the one thing, again, very 2003, and it was really one of the only things in this storyline that I rubbed up against, but it's, product of its time, is there's a scene where they're over at his house and he's confiding her how difficult it all is. And he's like, and,
I forgot
Sam,
about this.
like, is having a tough time, and like, I'm just the stepdad. Like, we already weren't close, and now this is this huge thing. And he's like, and he just cries all the time. And then he bursts into tears. Like, he just starts sobbing and like holds his head in his hands.
This is weird.
And Emma Thompson, like, obviously notices this and like comforts him a little bit. And she's like, hey, women don't like pussies. Don't do that. Like, don't cry. And I was just like, again, it's one of those things of like, it's sort of played off as if it is sort of like good friends joking around and being like, hey,
like,
it's okay.
I haven't
like,
said exactly that to you
Sure.
before, but like we do that every once in a while, but it doesn't
just
land that way.
No,
'cause the music I feel like from memory was maybe there and was like sad and song. They play that classic Love Actually theme. It's just some piano.
Right. But it's just like that moment is just kind of a weird brush off of this dude, obviously in grief.
Yeah,
and being
I feel
like, hey,
there's a time and a place.
yeah, it's like, yeah, maybe just, it could have been a very nice moment of just embracing some male vulnerability, but instead, like, turning it into a tongue-in-cheek joke of like, well, you're never going to get laid if you're sad all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
And that's
this
true.
was a couple days ago. Like,
yeah,
what
like,
do you...
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. But it's so that's his whole thing, is that he's like, well, my stepson is having a really tough time with this, and I don't know how to help.
And then he asks his stepson what's going on. His stepson's just like, oh, I know I should be sad about mom.
He's like, and I am. But also, like, that's not the thing that's bothering
I'm in love.
me. Yeah.
He's in love with one of his classmates who's a transfer student from America. And then Liam Neeson's like, well, we'll help you. We'll get you figured out.
Yeah, and it's just a very charming, like, they keep brainstorming stuff, and then eventually his son comes to him and is like, hey, she really likes music. I could be a musician. He's like, it's a great plan. It's flawless. One tiny little hiccup. You don't know any musical instruments. Yeah. He's like, yeah, we'll figure that out.
And
so he takes up drumming.
And he takes up the drums, and Liam Neeson's like,
Yeah, there's lots of good, like, beleaguered parents just listening to their child just bang away on this thing.
But all really nice.
It's
like,
really good.
He's
it's
never
really
not
lovely. It's very
supportive
charming.
of him. He's like, we're going to do this. He plays the drums in the Christmas pageant where his crush sings All I Want for Christmas Is You. And then here's the thing. Here's my hang up on this. And I know it doesn't really it's not that big of a deal. But
yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
Thomas Brody Sangster's crush is American, and her family are flying back to America the same night as the Christmas pageant.
Christmas Eve.
Which is Christmas Eve. And they're flying back to America, to like JFK. The same night as the Christmas pageant.
Yeah.
And I understand that it is technically doable.
Sure.
It just feels like an unnecessary, it just feels like an unnecessary amount of time.
Yeah.
Or like amount of like stress. I just feel like you could have done it day before and had her and say, I'm so sorry, sorry, Joanna, you can't be in the pageant.
Also, what school event is happening on Christmas Eve?
Right?
Kind of wild.
That's pretty weird.
Pretty strange.
Anyway, there's some holes here that what was really going on? No. Anyway, it's fine. But then they go to the airport to catch her, and Thomas Brody Sangster runs through the airport security in 2003. And I just feel like I don't know if they would have allowed that. But Rowan Atkinson is there.
Yes.
And he was earlier, but we'll get to him. He's there, and he does some little Mr. Bean magic.
Yeah, distracts some guards.
Distracts the guard so he can run through, and he runs, and he sees her, and she knows his name, and he's like, wow. And then she kisses him on the cheek, and then...
Yeah.
And then at the end, that she comes back.
Well, he goes all the way back out to the front entrance, and she follows him and gives him a kiss, and then has to run all the way back through the airport to catch her plane, which they don't show. But I just realized that I was like, she comes all the way back. He would have
like walked or ran. The security guards grab him and they take him all the way out. And I guess you're right. That whole time she was just walking behind, and then had to walk all the way back.
Yeah. So that storyline is very fun and charming. There's a very unnecessary throw-in of a new romantic interest for Liam Neeson of like one of the moms at the school.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Scene.
And then at the ending shot in the airport, she's there with her son.
I don't know why you need that.
And I'm like, that's
weird.
I
think you just like, again, if the thesis of this movie is that there are all different kinds of love and they show up in different ways, I like the idea of, hey, like, love is grief too.
Yeah.
And like, and he talks about that of he's trying to console his son, and he's like, hey, look, like, I'm sure she's wonderful, I'm sure she's amazing, but like, you've got your whole life ahead of you, like, there's going to be so many people. And he's like, there wasn't for you. He's like, you had yours. And he's like, yeah, I did. Like, your mom was mine.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, and she's mine. Like, I don't know how to tell you this.
Yeah.
And then to have them be like,
no.
well, no. And I get it. Like, it's in certain contexts, it's a nice sentiment of saying, like, yeah, you can find love again and all those things. But
But it's really rushed.
it's
and
a really weird
underdeveloped.
afterthought.
Yeah, it is.
When the rest of this storyline is so focused on, like, his grief and the love he had for his wife, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's just like weird of like love is all around,
Mm.
but there's only really one story that isn't romantic love,
Yeah,
which is just Bill Nye and his manager.
right.
Because the son stuff is fundamentally about being in love with another person. Right? Like it is about the love between them, but not really.
Yeah, there feels like a really missed opportunity to have, like, a sub-storyline of, like, sibling love with Emma Thompson and Hugh
Yeah,
Grant.
well, I feel like that also is a better ending for the Emma Thompson Alan Rickman story
Totally.
than what we got. Let's talk Alan Rickman and Emma Thompson. So Alan Rickman is the boss of a. We don't have. I'm sorry if I'm making you do this, and you're like in crisis, just having the worst time.
I don't understand this storyline.
Yeah, so Alan Rickman is a boss at a publishing place, and we first meet him because he pulls Laura Linney into his office, and he goes, "I know you want to have sex with Carl." That's
Everybody
bad,
knows.
Alan Rickman, but and everyone knows. And she's like, "Everyone knows?" And he's like, "Yes." And he's like, "I think you should tell me you want to have sex and have lots of babies." And it's like funny, but also,
where's HR?
I think every job in this movie needs to have an HR
Where's
department.
HR in this
Because
movie?
every relationship in a workplace in this movie is bad, and they need an HR department.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to figure something out. We need to send HR to England immediately.
Please.
The Prime Minister needs one.
Richard Curtis must be stopped.
Alan Rickman needs one. Bill Nye and his manager need HR.
Yep.
It's just really, really weird power dynamics, and it's not great. Anyway, so that's Alan Rickman's introduction. And then his secretary comes in and makes a pass at him.
Yeah.
And rather than being like, "I'm married," or it's getting worse, or so, but he's like, instead he's just kind of like, like,
He seems neither interested nor put off. He feels entirely neutral about this development. He's sort of like, well, the tension's nice. But also he's like, doesn't care. He just does not like, and I don't think it's Alan Rickman's fault. I think it's the way that the character is written.
Yeah.
Just, he is because at the end, he can't be entirely lecherous, otherwise the ending it falls apart. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so because of that, they're like, well, there has to be conflict enough that
Yeah.
this is an issue, and we get this really great Emma Thompson scene later. But also, we can't make him so deplorable that we aren't, like, rooting for them to stay together. And so he just lands at this entirely neutral point at these completely inappropriate passes being made at him.
which makes it feel really passive and weird.
It's really strange.
And so she keeps making passes at him. And a height of this storyline, I think, the peak of this storyline is when Emma Thompson, they dance together at a Christmas party for their workplace. And Emma Thompson's like, "Hey, she's pretty. She's cute." Yeah. And he's like, "Is she?" And she goes, "You know that she is. Be careful."
Yeah.
Cut to secretary in her house takes off her dress, walks
Nobody's there.
walks towards
It's
camera,
just her.
and that's the end of that scene. It's just there for us to see, oh, she's hot, isn't she? And I leaned over you and looked at Will, and Will had his face in his hands, and was shaking his head because the male gaze in this movie is insane.
Gaze is rampant.
Bad.
Holy shit.
How was this liked by people?
Like, just,
So
I
much.
get it was 20 years ago, but also, like, it feels like the way a James Bond movie from the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, the way the camera looks at women.
I mean, even the Brosnan movies were doing that
Yeah,
in the
it
90s.
just-
So it's just
I
bad.
don't understand it.
Because in Colin Firth's story, they do like a really long pan up from the legs up and then back down. Oh God, I think I just peaked the mic, but if any movie is going to make me do that, it's Love Actually. So anyway, Alan Rickman spends the whole movie, and then at one point Alan Rickman's like, "I'm going to buy her a necklace."
Yeah, which also, like, thank God it's just a necklace, because, like, she's talking to him in the office, and she's like, "Hey, you should get something for me. Like, give me something I like." And I was like, "So you're just gonna go buy a lingerie set?"
Well,
for
she
this
also
woman?
at one point is like spreads her legs a little
Yeah.
bit. We don't see anything. It's not
Sure.
like,
No.
but
it's again,
she's
like,
just so, it's not okay.
which is also, like, this movie is full of gorgeous, amazing, talented, interesting women.
Yes.
and a lot of very average British men. Like, I love Alan Rickman so
Yes.
much. He's incredibly
Yeah.
talented. But just like, as far as his character goes and how he's portrayed in the movie, the most nothing guy in the world.
Yeah.
And this woman is throwing herself at him.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what is this?
Maybe he has, because that's the thing, he doesn't have any passion for his work, it seems.
Yeah.
The most we get from him is his playful interaction with Laura Linney
Mm-hmm.
at the start, and then the rest of the movie is kind of just like,
Yeah.
And then he goes to the mall with his wife, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I'm going to go get stuff for the moms. And he's like, okay. He goes to get a necklace for this girl, his secretary.
It's the ugliest necklace you've ever seen.
Ugly
It's
necklace.
a really bad necklace. And
Really
it's like
bad.
$300.
Like, bad. And he gets there, and Rowan Atkinson's there. And
Mm-hmm.
he goes, and he's doing funny Mr. Bean stuff.
Yes.
He's doing little flourishes and taking a really long time. And Alan Rickman's like, can we speed,
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, just leave it.
Yeah.
But he clearly went back for it, got it without all the furnishings. But here's the thing, is that I knew Rowan Atkinson was in this movie as kind of an angel character.
Yeah, like the spirit of Christmas.
The spirit of Christmas being like, be good, have
He shows
love.
up twice.
Shows up twice.
Because
I
I'd
thought
also
he
heard
was
that
gonna
about
show
him.
up
I
in-
was like, oh, okay, like he's
thought he-
Clarence the Angel.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be the Clarence the Angel for this movie. No.
Shows up twice.
Shows up twice to do something for Alan Rickman. And it's like he's kind of trying to sabotage his...
Yeah, like he's
his-
trying to like pump the brakes on this.
But he could have done a lot more.
Yeah.
And then he helps Thomas Brody Sangster get past the guards at
And
the
it's
airport.
just like, at that point, it's like, why not just relegate him to a silly little guy in the Alan Rickman storyline? Like, why does he show up
Yeah.
in the Liam Neeson
It
storyline?
feels like he
I
should
don't
have
get
been
it.
in other parts.
Yeah. Either
Right?
keep him in one or put him in all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird.
I was really excited about an idea I had when I saw the scene with him and Alan Rickman, where I went, there's a version of this movie, maybe written and directed by a woman, which would help.
Sure.
But even if not that, where Rowan Atkinson is like a spirit of Christmas stopping people from doing terrible things in love relationships. So he would be there. He would like erase Andrew Lincoln's tape or something, or like break all his cue cards, or just beat him up in an alley.
Mr. Bean jumping Andrew Lincoln in a back alley of London. Incredible.
Wouldn't you like?
I'd watch that.
You know, the real version of it would be that he gives a letter to Chiwetel Ejiofor,
Oh, sure.
or that details everything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, or like he shows up in the Hugh Grant story and he's like beats up the president of the United States in an alley. Okay, maybe I just want a movie where he beats up everything. Anyway, he beats up. Love Actually is Mr. Bean beating you up in an alley.
You know, I think there's a entire James Bond parody franchise of his I think you'd really enjoy.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Can't wait to
Maybe check
watch
those
Johnny
out.
English
Go watch
next
some
year.
Johnny
We're gonna
English,
watch
man.
all three. That's our first 3 episodes of 2024. Anyway, so Emma Thompson sees that Alan Rickman has bought the necklace in his
Yeah.
coat pocket, and she thinks it's for her. She's really excited.
Which again, like it's just this dude is incompetent
Yeah.
in every aspect of his life.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if you're gonna be sneaky about this, maybe don't have your wife take off the coat that this very large package is sitting in the pocket of. Maybe be like, when she offers to take it, like, no, I'll take it upstairs. It's
Yeah.
wet. Like, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. But he just doesn't.
He just doesn't even think to hide his
Yeah.
his
So she sees it, thinks it's for her.
spends weeks getting excited about it
Mm-hmm.
because she's like, wow, he bought me something nice. He never does that.
It's Christmas Eve, and they're opening one present because it's Christmas
Yes.
Eve. They all get one present, and she's like, "Oh, I really want to open that one," because she looks at the shape and
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh, that's the box."
It's a Joni Mitchell CD
Mm-hmm.
because earlier in the movie she talks about how much she loves Joni Mitchell, and he kind of makes fun of her.
Yeah,
And so this is a nice,
it's a nice little thoughtful, like genuinely, it's
Yeah.
a thoughtful gift from
Right.
him. Because it's like a very nice CD,
and
like,
arguably better than an ugly necklace.
totally. Because
However,
it's like, hey, I know you as a person.
however, where'd that necklace go?
Yeah.
It went to the secretary.
Which we then cut to by herself again in her apartment in sexy underwear, putting on the necklace for nobody except us, the
Yeah.
audience. And it's weird.
Weird to have a character that solely exists to be sexualized and
Mm-hmm.
also for us to leer at.
Yeah.
To present her and go, don't you want to look at her? And I go,
don't
not
like it.
really.
Not really. I would like to stay with Emma Thompson.
I find her
crying
character
about her
pretty
marriage.
unlikable altogether.
Yeah.
A woman who's actively trying to make a man be disloyal. Emma Thompson takes a moment on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve and goes and listens to the CD for a minute, and it's both sides now, which is wonderful. And it's really nice.
It's really great
really,
performance.
Really good performance, a really powerful scene. And her having to come back and be like, okay, we're going to go to the pageant. It's going to be great.
And they were talking about, we joked about it a little bit, but it's still like a good point of afterwards, because it was the 20th anniversary, they had a little snippet of like the making of documentary.
Yeah.
And the cinematographer was like, yeah, like we didn't have to do anything in that scene. Like we set up 3 cameras and we just let her do her thing. And he's like, it's incredible. Like she's an incredible performer.
Yeah.
And just like, we just kept the camera static and we just let her act and feel it out. And she does an amazing job with it. And Will leaned over. He's like, oh yeah, cinematography, easy when you just have one of the most talented actresses in the world. She does her job for you. You don't even have to worry about it. But it is like, it's a testament to the fact that like, it's a very, like the movie is very high energy.
Yes.
And like not goofy, but it's a comedy.
It's pretty goofy in some places.
Yeah, and like this scene is a very nice change of pace of just like we just slow it down and stay with her while this song plays, and she just weeps and is trying to keep it together. And this energy of like a huge realization that your world has fallen apart, but you have responsibility still.
Yeah.
And you still like you have to soldier on. You have to get it together for the people in your life because there are people depending on you.
Yeah.
And that I just think it's really nice. Like she's trying to get herself ready and she does the bed a little bit, like is doing these chores and is dabbing her makeup and trying to keep the tears away, and then goes downstairs like, okay, let's go. Let's get you to the Christmas pageant. Like goes straight into mom mode. And it's a really nice moment.
It is. It's really nice. And then at the Christmas pageant, when it's all over, she takes Alan Rickman aside and says, what would you do in my situation if you knew that you got a necklace or whatever? Should I cut ties? Or should I try and make it work? And he, again, is just kind of like...
no answer. I'm
nothing.
so sorry.
Nothing.
Like, and she gives him, like, again, a nuanced portrayal of something like this in a relationship that has lasted this long, a marriage with children, all of these things. And she's like, would you think that it was just a necklace? Would you think that it's a necklace with sex?
Yeah.
Or worst of all, would you think it's a necklace and love?
Yeah.
And he has no answer for her.
We have no idea what's going on through his head for this. We don't know what he's thinking or feeling about this situation because he's so passive and doesn't say anything about it. To his secretary, the only sign that we even have that he was going to get a necklace for her is that he calls her on the phone and goes, what would you want? Mm-hmm. And she's like, something pretty I can wear. And he's like, and it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
And in the making of documentary clip they showed at the end, they're like, and Alan Rickman bringing such a nuanced performance to this complicated character. And I'm like, he wasn't complicated. He just wasn't doing anything.
He's just completely indecisive.
Yeah.
And we know nothing about his motivation or like...
or what he's thinking
what he thinks or how he feels about it. And it's, again, one of those things that the movie is so predisposed to these grand romantic gestures of love and these monologues. I'm like, where is the scene where he pulls her aside and is just like, hey, look, like, I got caught up in the throes of this, but like, you're the one. Like, I know you. Like Joni Mitchell. Like, all of these things, our children, our life together. Like, none of this means anything to me, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the ways I've hurt you.
Yeah.
Nothing happened, because to the best of our knowledge, these two didn't sleep together. Like, there has been no physical altercation other than just dancing and some workplace, like, flirtation.
Yeah, but only from her.
Yeah, like, it's very one-sided, and so if he's just like, yeah, look, the attention was nice, nothing happened, and it's not going to happen, and just, like, an apology, an acknowledgement of the ways that he's hurt her, just doesn't exist, isn't in this movie.
And you're absolutely right that it's like, because it ends with them at the airport and she comes back from a trip or whatever. And she's like, how are you? And he's like, good. And they're like clearly still together, trying to work through this, which is a nuanced ending for this.
Sure.
But also it's not really an ending.
No.
Because in this movie, love is doing something huge and he doesn't do anything huge and it feels out of place.
It's very strange.
It feels like they didn't have the time for him to do some big gesture, so they just elected to do nothing. And
again, missed opportunity of there is half a moment that is nice that I wish they just would have expanded on of at this culminating Christmas pageant where everybody shows up, Hugh Grant runs into Emma Thompson, his sister, and she just gives him a big hug. She's like, I've never been so relieved to see my big brother.
Yes.
Like, and you can just tell that she's just falling apart. And
Yeah.
she's like, I really need to tell you all of this stuff that's been going on, and I need to talk to somebody about it. And there's none of that. We don't get any of it.
recounting that almost made me tear up.
Yeah.
Because that is such a nice sentiment.
It is.
But they don't have time for it.
They don't have time for it. They just brush past it, and it bums me out because you could cut out the entirety of I'm going to go to America to have great sex storyline
Yes. Oh my God,
free
yes.
up some time for these moments.
Yes. Yes. And I think at the end of this, we'll talk about which stories they should have cut to make this better.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
typically we try not to be like, here's what I would have done with the movie.
Right. But it's just like, this one is so frustrating because as we're talking about it, obviously there are moments here that are working.
Yes.
Obviously there is stuff that is charming and effective and emotional.
Yes.
And it is bogged down by too many cooks in the kitchen and by really terrible 2003, thought processes and opinions.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And it bums me out.
Yeah, because that is so nice. And also I would be interested to explore the relationship between a sister and her brother who's the prime minister. Totally. And being like, I can't talk to you as much anymore. Like,
yeah. And there's and she thinks he's there for her kids. And she's like, wow, you came.
Yeah.
Like I know how busy you are, but it means so much to me that you're here. And I'm actually a hiff because there's just,
yeah.
Yeah,
Really disappointing because Emma Thompson is doing so much in this movie.
She's doing a lot.
And Alan Rickman, I think, is trying his best.
He is. It's just the character just doesn't give him anything to work with.
Yeah. And it was nice to see him. Totally. I forgot he was in this. Mm-hmm. And when he showed up, I was like, oh.
Yeah. As much as I am clowning on his character, Alan Rickman here, it's just nice to see him in something. It's just nice
to see him in something that I hadn't seen him in before. Okay. Who else is there?
I mean,
Colin Firth.
We
already kind of talked about those other ones.
Yeah,
Laura Linney has sex with Carl. I think those are all pretty. Those aren't the big ones.
No,
those are like
we did like the three big ones. The rest of these, you already kind of summarized as you're going through.
I don't think we need to go too deep into them. Okay, so what's your number one story in this? Is it Liam Neeson?
I think so. I really like the Liam Neeson story.
Me too.
I think it's really solid.
And does the least reprehensible things.
Yeah.
We have the least qualms with that one,
I
think.
So I would say that's my number one. Number two, it's not as substantial as the other, but as far as if I'm going off of the ones I have the least problems with, the Martin Freeman one is just fun. It's just so silly nice. And charming.
That one,
which is, again, this movie is so strange to me because in so many ways, it is entirely of its time of 2003 with really outdated opinions and, all of that stuff.
Weird jokes
and all these things. Yeah. But then also, it's oddly ahead of its time and progressive in a lot of other ways.
Yeah.
Like the Martin Freeman storyline is maybe the best handling of that kind of situation of a pair of stand-ins on a porn set.
Yeah.
It's very interesting and funny. It's just this is just their job. And the camera shoots them as if it is a job. There's no male gaze to any of that stuff.
No. The male gaze was saved for literally everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing is that's this feels like the place where you'd get a lot of that. A lesser version of this storyline would be he falls in love with this girl because he's starting to take note of her body.
Yeah.
It's oh, you're actually really attractive.
Yeah.
And I know it's just a job, but man, wow. And the camera would linger in those
Yeah.
ways. But it doesn't. It's very much it is presented as a workplace comedy and very locked down static shots that aren't sensationalizing anything. It's just focusing on the characters.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
That's really well. I think it's a great point. Also, ever since we watched Fast Times for this podcast, I can't get it out of my head that what's her name? The director of that movie,
Amy Heckerling.
That Amy Heckerling was if she's gonna be fully nude, he's gonna be fully nude.
Yeah.
And I think about that every time I see a sex scene in a movie now.
Totally.
And this movie obviously does have that, but not the same way though, because Martin Freeman is naked.
Yeah.
But we don't see any we don't see any full frontal from anyone.
Well, I mean, Amy Heckerling talks about that, where she's when a woman shows her breasts on film, she's risking something.
Right.
A man being shirtless risks nothing.
Yeah.
There has to be.
And so that is still the case. Sorry, I just cleared my throat into the mic. That is still the case with Martin Freeman and Carl.
Sure.
But whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't hold everything to that standard.
Right.
But I just want to bring that up, that I do think about that now every single time.
Yeah.
I'm
So just I totally agree. And I think that has like fundamentally changed the way I view those scenes. Like hearing that interview, I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I like the way that the storyline is handled in the film. And there's another really quick like throwaway thing during the Liam Neeson story where he's kind of probing his son about his crush, and he's like, "Well, who is she or he?" Like, and he just says it so casually, and his son's like, "It's a she," and then they just move on.
Which
and
was
I'm just
nice.
like, that's really cool for 2003. Nice.
Because I was really worried we were going to get a lot of like homophobic and transphobic jokes in this.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
No.
There is that funny, it's pretty funny, the joke about Elton John's party. Where Bill Nighy comes back to his manager and he's like, "I wanted to come back and spend Christmas with you." And he's like, 10 minutes at Elton John's party and you're already gay or whatever.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It's funny.
It was
It's
funny.
a good joke.
It was a good joke. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird movie. I feel like I like the Bill Nighy stuff.
Yeah,
I think that's funny.
Is that like 3 for you then in your ranking?
Yeah, if it's like Liam Neeson and his son
Neeson.
Martin Freeman, I think Bill Nighy is 3.
Yeah, just again off of like
It's like a funny thing.
inoffensiveness
Yeah,
mostly.
Yeah, mostly inoffensive, and it's like so funny to see Bill Nighy doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And then mostly inoffensive, except for constantly being mean to his manager, but whatever. And then I would say, I don't know, with Colin Firth's story, I'm really torn on. Because there's nothing really bad about it.
But there's nothing really good about it either.
It doesn't really work because we're not there with... That's a whole movie in and of itself.
Totally.
That's an entire movie.
Yeah.
That they just don't really show and they cut out. And Colin Firth feels so separate from everyone else to the point that he's not at the wedding, but that he says he's at.
Yeah.
And I forgot that he knows people, and clearly they just got everyone together for that airport scene right at the end. So I feel like he is lower, but I think that story also isn't that offensive.
Sure.
Except for the male gaze.
I think
shot.
for me, I would place number 4 based on like the really high highs and the really low lows. It was probably the Hugh Grant stuff. It's
think so.
really charming,
Yes.
and when it works really, really well.
Yes.
The whole subplot with the president and
Yeah.
everything going on there and the weird fat phobia, I
Yeah.
don't like any of that stuff.
No.
But his and her dynamic and their chemistry
Yes.
is palpable enough
yes.
and charming enough that I'm like, I like the time that I
agree.
spend with these characters.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's kind of 4. And then Alan Rickman, Emma Thompson's also kind of in there. Mainly the Emma Thompson
The Emma
part
Thompson stuff.
gets it up there for me.
Totally.
The Alan Rickman stuff, obviously, I'm just like, what are we doing
Whatever.
here? Laura Linney just kind of falls in the cracks. She's
Which is
there.
too bad.
Yeah.
Like it's just
she's
'cause-
good. I like Laura
Yeah,
Linney.
again, they have interesting chemistry, but the movie in its effort to be nuanced doesn't say anything.
No.
It is just kind of middle of
That's-
the ground.
I guess that's kind of our sibling love story, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
we
not
get-
really.
Not really.
Because
and-
it almost plays it as the moral good is for her to always be on call for her disabled brother.
right.
And she can never have a life of her own.
And there's not enough pushback from the outside parties to like really stick that landing because
No.
there's a moment where she's hooking up with this guy and she explained, they're like in the throes and she has to stop to answer the phone and has
Yes.
some ridiculous conversation about exorcisms and the Pope and whatever. And then explains her situation with her brother and all these things. And he's like, "I'm so sorry," like that. She's very understanding
Yeah.
and very kind. And they kind of get back into it again. The phone rings and he pulls away and he's like, "Will it make him better if you answer? Like, will it fix this?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, it won't." He's like, "Well, then maybe you can let this one go. Like, maybe, it's not going to be the end of the world." And she doesn't listen. She pulls
answers
away and
it.
she answers the phone.
And that's the end of their relationship.
It is. And that's the thing is like, if the end point is, it is morally good and right and proper for her to just be living a life for her brother, which is kind of where this lands, it would feel like the way of getting the audience on board with that is like making that more of an argument, making him more of like kind of an asshole about it.
Yeah.
But he's very kind and very understanding. It's a very gentle, just like, "Hey, you can live for yourself." And she's like, "No, I can't."
Yeah.
And that's it.
And again, a whole movie exploring that
Totally.
would be interesting. Mm-hmm. But because we don't have time for that, it leaves Laura Linney just Christmas Eve with her brother. And it's not like he's not being taken care of.
No.
Like, she can not answer the phone once or twice.
Right.
But I don't know. It's just the movie doesn't seem to really know where it lands on it and just
Yeah.
kind of goes, well, this one we can probably just leave up.
Yeah, they're like, "Here's a complicated situation, and we're not going to have anything
Yeah,
to say
it's similar
about
to the
it."
Alan Rickman one with that.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like,
I don't
we can
know,
just leave
shrug
that
it
one
off.
like open.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And then I just really wish that the Chris Marshall story wasn't in here. Because it's not even that good of a joke.
It's not. It's I don't know why it's here.
It's weird.
It's really strange. Especially because, like, that exists entirely as, like, a comic relief subplot, but that's what the Bill Nighy stuff is doing.
Yeah.
And it's doing it better.
Yeah, we don't need that.
We don't need a purely comic subplot.
No.
We don't need another one. We have one.
Yeah, I would cut the Andrew Lincoln thing because it's weird.
Yeah.
I would cut the Chris Marshall stuff. And I would maybe even cut the Laura Linney stuff.
Yeah.
So that we can focus on
the others.
The others. Like Hugh Grant, Liam Neeson, Emma Thompson. I think
Colin
are the
Firth?
three. Huh?
Would you keep Colin Firth around?
I might even cut Colin Firth.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's its own movie. If Richard Curtis wants to make that movie, he can make that movie.
Sure.
But it's not here.
No.
And it's so separate. He's not even in England. He's in France. And it just feels weird that we're cutting away to this like romance novel.
Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, so I'd even though I love Colin Firth, it was nice to see a younger Colin Firth again.
And he's doing a good job.
He's doing a good job. No, he's very charming as well. Mm-hmm. Who knew if you put a lot of
nice
Britain's most charming white men into a movie, they would do a good job.
Yeah. It's a charming scene when he goes to find her family, and then the whole town marches down to her job.
They're also really fatphobic about her sister and mean and weird.
I hate it.
But it was really funny when they were like, he's going to sell her to an American as a slave or what. Like,
yeah.
There's like funny things happening.
Yeah, and he's trying his best in his broken Portuguese.
Yes.
And it's charming, and he's making the
Something
effort.
I thought was interesting about the audience we watched this with is that we were laughing when Colin Firth wasn't doing great at Portuguese. Mm-hmm. No one else really was.
No.
And then when she was bad at English, people in our audience laughed at that. And I went, interesting.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother topic of like, it was interesting watching this with a crowd of what I would assume. I think we were the only people in that audience who had never seen it before.
Yeah.
I think these entirely people who came out to see it because they've watched
because
it and they
normally
love it.
the only people who would pay to see Love Actually in theaters are people who like it.
Totally. And so it was interesting the stuff that we were laughing at versus what they were laughing at.
Yeah. I was really worried someone would be mad at us.
Yeah.
Like someone would be like, can you shut up?
Yeah.
Because we were just like, what is going on?
What's happening?
Anyway, I think that's Love Actually.
Yeah, I don't know what else we can say about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird
movie. Again, it's as much as I've been, razzing it this whole time and beleaguered, it is not completely irredeemable.
No.
There are pieces here that are working really well and are very charming and fun and have that schmaltzy Christmas magic that I enjoy quite a bit.
And I understand.
I get it.
I understand why people like this movie.
Sure. I just don't think that it is entirely. We've talked about this a little bit, and you could do an entire episode all about this idea of like, not even nostalgia glasses, but like movies that you grew up with are always going to have a certain energy to them that nobody else understands other than you, because you're like, yeah, this is like, I have a history with this.
Yes.
And I'm sure that people who watched this with their family when they were very young and are missing a lot of the stuff that we're rubbing up against, by the time they get older, have just completely ignored the stuff we're rubbing up against. Because they're like, no, but look at all the good parts.
Right.
And us as people coming in, never having seen it, we're taking all of it at face value as it's happening in our mid-20s.
In 2023 at our mid-20s.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you have to kind of take that into consideration when you look at it. But that's the thing that's frustrating to me about this movie, is that if it was all terrible, I could just throw it away and laugh at it.
And we would have made it the shortest episode we've ever recorded.
Yeah, exactly. It would just been like, no, of course it isn't. Yeah. Why did we do this? But there is qualities in here that I like quite a bit. And it's just muddied down by a lot of stuff that I really just didn't care for.
And feels really unnecessary.
Totally.
And something that I said immediately after the movie was over was, I was like, fascinating that Richard Curtis thinks this is like a really wonderful look at what love is and what love means, and how they were like, this whole movie was built around that idea of like people at Heathrow Airport.
Yeah.
And yet the portrayal of love in this movie is as some sort of awful force that men use to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
That women are under the control of. Like, it's this weird thing of like, or even that the secretary is using on Alan Rickman.
Totally.
That love is of a power to be wielded against others or to trick others or to manipulate others into doing things that you want.
And it's interesting too. I hadn't really put this together until you were just phrasing it that way, that like the only storyline that really gives us like active female pursuit of love is Laura Linney, and it ends as a non-starter.
Yes.
It is unsuccessful.
Yes.
Which
And
is
she's better taking care of her disabled brother.
Right.
Yeah.
She is, yeah. Her version of love is much better suited to the stereotype of like female caregiver.
Yes.
That is where her love needs to be going,
Yes.
is what the movie says.
Yeah. And other than that, yeah.
Yeah, like that is the that is the only example of women
because
wielding
Natalie
love.
isn't actively making decisions she's not making moves on Hugh Grant. There's a bit of chemistry there,
Sure.
and I think she's aware of that, clearly.
But she's not pursuing him.
To the point that when someone else comes after her, she feels the need to apologize to him because she was somewhat aware that he was pursuing her.
Right.
But there's no mutual pursuing.
No.
Because on some level, you could read it as she understands that there's a clear power dynamic there, but not really, because Richard Curtis wouldn't write it that way. It feels like women are not active in the love stories in this movie.
No. They're
And if
acted
they
upon.
are, it's the promiscuous secretary who is literally dressed as the devil at the Christmas party,
Yeah.
tempting Alan Rickman away. So you can either be a woman that a man pursues and falls in love with. You can be a caregiver like Emma Thompson and
Laura
Linney, or you can be a temptation for man.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the three women that exist in this movie, because Keira Knightley, temptation for man.
Yeah.
And that's why he was avoiding her.
Right.
Self-preservation, he says.
Yeah.
What a bummer.
Well, on that note.
on that bummer of a note, criteria.
Okay, yeah, criteria. Let's just speed run this.
Yeah.
Historical and technical significance.
It certainly made a pop culture impact.
Totally.
I think that's it.
That's it.
It made a splash pop culturally,
Sure.
but I don't think it
There was
outweighs Citizen Kane.
I can't remember what the third one was, but there was somebody pointed out the other day, which I thought was really interesting, that they're like, we haven't gotten like juggernaut Christmas canon classic movies since 2003, because that year we got Elf, we got this, and there's one other they mentioned I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But they were talking about like, yeah, that was like the last heavy hitter year of like, oh yeah, these are now in rotation constantly for everyone.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. But to your point, yeah, it made a splash pop culturally, not nearly enough to take a point, but worth a
Because
mention.
again, we are comparing it to Citizen Kane.
Yes.
And I don't think this movie is trying to be better than Citizen Kane, but it's certainly trying to do something.
It's trying to do something, and I think it's not doing it very well.
No, because if the goal was the beauty of Heathrow Airport reunions, the movie is not about that at all.
No. And if it is a movie about the beauty of different kinds of love,
It's not.
It's not.
About
It
one
is.
kind of love for the most part.
mostly about romantic love.
Yep. And also, if it's about how wonderful love can be, for the most part, I went yuck to most of these now.
And if it is about how the Christmas spirit brings out love, it completely fails at that. You could set this at any time of the year, and it would make almost no difference.
That's true. But we wouldn't get Bill Nighy's Christmas song,
No, naturally.
which is a
But he could have... I just need a scene of Bill Nighy on his TikTok account being like, did I just make the song of the summer?
oh yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like summer's all around
Exactly.
me. Yeah, you can set this anywhere.
He said anytime.
Yeah, I don't think it works very well as a Christmas movie, other than the fact that it's set at Christmas.
Sure.
Has that Christmassy vibe. I do agree with you. I think there was a bit of the Christmas magic in this, but that just comes naturally.
The recital has a lot of that energy.
recital
that does
does.
a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah. And there are just some nice moments
Sure.
that I liked. But yeah, overall, I would say this movie is not doing what it's trying to do very well.
No.
So the
And
point goes to Citizen Kane.
how well did you connect with this personally?
I didn't connect with this emotionally at all, except for when you recounted Emma Thompson running into her brother. And I went, oh God, that was nice.
It's a nice little moment.
And I did laugh a lot.
Sure.
So the movie
No, it
is,
was
the
genuinely
movie's trying
funny.
to be funny.
Yeah.
Because the tagline for this movie was very romantic, very comedy. Wild.
Right.
Um,
Doge meme.
That was one of their many taglines. I would say that it does work as a comedy.
Yeah.
So I'll give it that.
I will give
but
it that. Again,
still
this
isn't
is not an irredeemable movie. I gave this like a 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah,
which is a 50%.
50%.
50% of the time I was enjoying it.
I would say 50% of the time I was having a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I will say it does work as a comedy. I was laughing.
Totally.
And there are Hugh Grant's very charming. Liam Neeson's very charming.
Yes.
Colin Firth was fairly charming. Emma Thompson's great.
Yep.
But I don't think I was connecting more with this movie than I was Citizen Kane.
No, and this is like a litmus test I've been using recently. Is that even movies that I like a lot, there is kind of this weird, like 3 categories for me of obviously the 2 big ones, movies I liked and movies I disliked. And then from there, a 3rd category of movies I will be watching again. Whether I liked or didn't like them. You know, you can. I've watched movies that I didn't like, and then I'm like, I really should just give it another chance, and I can't stop thinking about it, and then I revisit it, and maybe my opinion changes, and maybe it doesn't, but like I'm drawn to rewatching it. And there are movies that I watch that I'm like, wow, that's an incredible movie. Don't think I'm ever gonna go out of my way to watch that again. Not because it's bad, not because it's not enjoyable, but because it just I don't feel called to it in that way, right? And this is very much like I've seen it. Don't think I'm ever going to go out of my way to watch this again. This is not a new holiday rotation for me.
No. If it's on at someone's house around Christmas time, I'll be like, I've seen this.
Sure.
I can check in. I can make some of my jokes about it. That's it.
Yeah.
But I will be watching Citizen Kane again.
Sure.
And not just because of this podcast.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So clean sweep for Citizen Kane. Criteria says it's not better, but take a step back. Rethink that, Parker. This
is the inverse of your Forrest Gump moment, where I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna talk myself into saying that this is better because it just isn't. Yeah. There's no way.
I think we can say, Love Actually isn't better than Citizen Kane, which is what Parker said at the start of the episode.
Yeah. You could have clocked out at minute 2.
But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. I think this is one of our stronger episodes.
This was
personally.
fun. I think we had a good time with it. It's there's a reason that the adage online is that content where you dislike the thing you're talking about always does better than stuff you're gushing about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because we can be funny.
We can be funny. We can have bits.
We can have bits about it.
We have jokes.
Any last stray thoughts?
Nah, I think I about covered it.
I think I'm done with Love Actually. Feels sad. What do you think of the title? Weird.
Especially because it's introduced with the full sentence on screen. It goes, Love Actually is all around.
And then the rest fades away.
The others.
But you can't call a movie Love Actually is all around.
Sure.
You would just say Love is all around.
Yeah, but then why not just have those 2 words pop up on screen when he says it?
Yeah.
I don't know why the whole sentence pops up as the title.
Or just name it Love is all around. Yeah. Which is less memorable than Love Actually. Love Actually.
We were making that joke a lot at iPop. Love Actually.
We had this bit about talking to Richard Curtis and him being like, all right, so what's your experience with love? I don't know what Richard Curtis sounds like. Yeah. What's your experience with love? And being like, oh, well, it's honest communication.
Love Actually is.
Love Actually
just
is
mansplaining love to you.
If you're like, well, I think love is honest communication with my partner. But love actually is a camera lingering on a woman's body for a while. And you're like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Richard. I didn't know.
And you? Well, love is for me. It's just being with my family but also having time to myself.
No,
love actually is committing yourself to your brother who's disabled and never doing anything else with your life. Oh, thanks, Richard.
All right. Well, on that note, Max, what are we watching?
I feel like we had such a good wrap up, and then I had to bring up more. Parker, what are we watching after this?
Yeah.
Well, our next episode comes out on Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
Wow. And our next episode is a Parker pick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I would argue, one of the only other, I think, Christmas canon movies that's been introduced.
I don't think personally,
it's not as mainstream as Elf, and that I think it's because it didn't go to theaters.
I think that was part of it.
It's Klaus. The Netflix animated movie Klaus, which is wonderful.
It's lovely.
And I'm excited to revisit it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is, we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm not going to say that. Happy Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, folks. Happy holidays.
Yeah. Happy holidays.
We'll catch you next
Happy
time.
Hanukkah as well.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. See you around.
Take care.